Hi, this is Luciana Paulise. Today I'm going to interview Josh Zywien. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you today because you're going to talk about a very interesting topic. You are part of Paradox.
That's right.
Is that
Yeah,
right?
that's correct. Yep.
Mhm. So Paradox is a company that is working on AI applied to hiring. Is that correct? Tell me more about that.
Sure. Yeah, that's right. I think it's there's multiple flavors of AI. I think when people hear it, they get kind of scared of like, what does that actually mean? Is somebody
Mhm.
making decisions about me personally when I apply to a job, and how are these algorithms interpreting my experience? And where Paradox, I think, is a little bit different is we're not trying to make decisions for people. We're just trying to get work done in an automated way to simplify the experience for the recruiters and hiring managers doing the work, but also the candidate. Just give the candidate an assistant so that it's easy to apply to jobs. It's easy to find jobs, easy to schedule interviews. If you have questions about the company, you can ask those questions. So it's almost like Siri or Alexa for work in a sense. So it's how do you give these people an assistant to help the hiring process be less painful? So that's really the idea there.
Oh, wow. So you mentioned Alexa. So is that I'm going to call Alexa and then get into an interview with Alexa? How is that work? Um, so I'm is now right now I'm gonna have an interview just with the sound of my voice. I don't need to write anything. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I think it's like voice in general is just a really interesting medium because we've all over the last, 10 years or so have become programmed to talk to our devices. Whether it's your iPhone and you pull it up and you ask Siri for directions, or you're in your house and you ask Alexa to turn your lights on, right? There's basic things that these machines essentially can do for you. So when you apply that to hiring, it's no different than, if you're sitting on your couch and you are sick of your current job and you're looking around and thinking about applying to a new one, you should just be able to say, hey Alexa, help me find a job at McDonald's, for example. And Alexa can respond and say, hey, I'm McDonald's personal hiring assistant, Olivia. And it kind of switches there between Alexa and Olivia because that's the name of our product. But then the assistant could help you find jobs and apply to jobs through the Alexa device. So we're kind of getting to that point where it's easy to find jobs, apply to jobs with your voice. The next step, that we're not there yet, but I think is certainly in the future is, do you have these machines actually conduct the interviews? Do you have them ask questions to the candidates? The candidates respond with their voice. Could even be done via video. I think where I don't want to get to that scares me a little bit is where the devices are actually like deciding yes or no, is this a good candidate? What we want to, or at least kind of what we advocate for, is there should still be a human on the other side that says, let me review their answers, let me look at the video, let me look if they're qualified to a certain degree, and then make a decision. There's certain things that are binary, like, are you old enough to work? Are you qualified to work? Can you lift 20 pounds? Are you available to work on weekends? Do you have a certain programming language skill set? Have you been a nurse for 20 years? Like, those are general basic requirements for a job. I think it's safe that machines can screen on that information because you either have it or you don't, and that's okay. Where we get into kind of the soft skills is where it gets really, really messy and interesting, not in a good way. So I think that's where we have to just toe that line very carefully and decide, what do we want a machine doing versus what do we want a human controlling?
Wow. So, yes, this is interesting because
Right.
I think it's, as you said, it's kind of scary that you're talking to a machine, but anyways, we're doing it for other reasons, right? My
Right.
daughter, she barely knows how to write, but she knows how to tell, YouTube to find a
Right.
video.
Yeah.
So, what is the benefit for the employers on one
Yeah.
side, and what is the benefit for the employees?
Yeah, so for the employers, I think it's relatively straightforward. It's if you're a company and you have a job open and you get 1,000 applicants, the challenge has always been, how do you respond to all 1,000 of them? How do you review every single resume that comes in? It's literally impossible. These companies are not staffed in a way where they have enough recruiters or enough hiring managers to look at every single application. So what typically ends up happening is it's either the first in or the last in. So the first resumes in are the ones that have the best chance, because you're the first 10 in, the hiring manager is going to look at those 10 and they're going to make a call. And sometimes the job is filled before the next 999 even get a chance to be considered. If you're last in, it means that all those 900, the hiring managers just didn't have time to get to all those people. So now it's because you're the last 10 in, you have an advantage. That's not exactly like an equitable or fair way to manage the hiring process, right? It doesn't mean that you're accessing the best people or the most qualified people. It just means I'm a hiring manager, I'm busy, or I'm a recruiter and I'm busy. I'm just going to take the quickest route to finding somebody and putting them in the job. So for them, it's how do you automate the process of saying, these are your qualified candidates, these are your unqualified candidates. Review the ones that are qualified and put a human on those folks. And for the ones that are unqualified, there's still an elegant way to handle dispositioning or disqualifying those candidates. Right now, a lot of times what happens is the candidate never hears back. And so it's just what we call the black hole. And the candidate just disappears. They apply to the job, they spend an hour doing it, and they never hear anything back. And so we think that there's a way, going to your question about the candidate, that you still have some sort of communication. So it's, hey, John, thanks for applying to the job. Unfortunately, you weren't qualified. We decided to move forward with other candidates. But oh, by the way, we have these other 5 jobs that are open and you look like a good fit for. So, again, providing that assistance to the candidate to say, you might not get this job, but we have other open opportunities, or we'd like to stay in touch. That feels really good as a candidate, because then at least you feel like, A, I was considered, and B, I've got this assistant kind of helping me out. Then on the candidate side too, it's how do you make the process easier? So don't ask 50 questions up front. Ask the 5 questions that you know are requirements. And if somebody doesn't meet them, then immediately guide them down a different path, as opposed to pushing everybody to apply. And then you've got 1,000 applicants that you can't handle. So it's, again, trying to relieve the recruiters and the hiring managers from a lot of that tactical administrative work. And then for candidates, just communicating and being transparent and fair and as open as you possibly can be.
Right. So the system is basically filtering more in a more effective way all the candidates and directing them to another path.
Yeah, and doing it in a conversational way. So back to your point about voice, we all text message and we all are used to chatting with things. So that feels very easy and very frictionless, versus if you give me the typical job application is 40 or 50 fields and it's multiple pages and you got to create a login, and it's just difficult and cumbersome. So the idea with us is, how do we make this conversational so that, as a candidate applying to a job, you get asked questions, you type back and you respond. And then that information is saved and it creates an application or a profile for you. Again, just trying to simplify, streamline things for candidates too.
Right. So when you mentioned about Alexa, it's really so if right now I can go to Alexa and do that, or is that I have because now you also mentioned that I have to fill in spaces, or that you fill in a form. I mean, how's the real process?
Yeah, so it really comes down to the employer. So it's not like we have a connection with Amazon and we've created something for Alexa specifically. What we have created is we've taken the experience that we can put on a career site or via text message and said, why not apply it to voice as well? So it comes down to McDonald's is a good example, and I can send you some follow-up information. But we worked with McDonald's, and McDonald's wanted to create this. Their whole concept was, how can we make it as quick and easy to apply to a job as going through the drive-through, right, and placing an order. And so they called this thing Apply Through. And so the idea is, how can you ask Alexa, help me find a job at McDonald's? And then, essentially Alexa is just integrating with our system, and that experience gets carried over to the voice. So it's available as long as you're working with us. But it is possible that it can definitely be done today.
Oh, okay. So it depends on the company. If that company is connected to your system, let's say like McDonald's, you can do it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And do you know what is the success rate with that, or how is it working for McDonald's or for the employer so far?
Yeah, for sure. So there's multiple kind of success metrics in my mind of, and it really depends on the hourly market versus high skilled engineering, nursing, doctor positions. But for McDonald's specifically, it used to take about 15 days or so, 16 days for them to fill a job. So a job would be opened up and it would take 2+ weeks for them to actually get somebody into the restaurant to fill that position. That doesn't seem like a lot of time, but for an hourly environment, it's an enormous amount of time. So their whole goal is, how do we shorten that down? We got them down to about 2 days, 2 to 3 days, from when somebody first engages and applies to a job to when they're starting. Yeah, that shortening it's incredible. It's just hugely impactful for McDonald's, but it's really just trying to remove the steps where a human used to have to move the candidate forward, and putting that in control of automation. So it's, instead of, waiting for the store manager to confirm an interview, it's connecting with the store manager's calendar, seeing what availability they have, and automatically suggesting that to the candidate and scheduling the interview automatically. So it's, removing those, the waiting period essentially. And you can dramatically reduce the time to fill a position. For a candidate too, it's like the drop-off rate is always the problem. So as soon as a candidate starts applying to a job, if it's difficult, they got to create a login. It takes 15-20 minutes. They're just not gonna. Not gonna finish.
It's the worst part.
Yeah. So what we typically find is it takes less than 2 minutes to apply to a job. Usually within a day, somebody's scheduled for an interview, and then within 3 or 4 days, they're receiving an offer to start at the company. So it's, those success metrics are pretty massive as well. And then I think to your question about the candidates, there is some fear of AI among candidates too, right? Like, it's, what is this machine? What is this algorithm deciding for me? How much control do I have?
Especially now after COVID, companies are trying to be even more human, trying to be more personalized, and this kind of seems like going the other way, or maybe not. Maybe you have the answer.
Yeah, I think it actually creates this more human experience, and I don't, obviously I work for a company that sells this technology, so I'm biased, but you have two options. Like, in the old world, when humans controlled every aspect of the process, what you ended up with is, 10 people would get responses and invitations for interviews, and 900 people would never hear a thing. And so that's not exactly a great experience either. And you're left kind of wondering as a candidate, like, what the heck, what did I do wrong? And what could I have done differently? Whereas by giving them this assistant, they can ask the assistant, let's say they have an interview. Where do I need to go for my interview? How should I dress? What sort of questions do I need to prepare for? And rather than waiting for the hiring manager or the recruiter to give them some guidance there, our assistant can actually answer those questions for them automatically. So it's, for the candidate, it's just this different experience of, I can get immediate answers to my questions. I can get immediately scheduled for the interview. If I didn't get the job, the assistant can help me find a different one. And so what we find is it's about 99% happiness rate with the conversation. So we'll ask candidates at the end, thumbs up, thumbs down, did you have a good experience? And about 99% give it a thumbs up. So it's, I think some of that is, it's a really low bar in recruiting. Most candidates expect to have a bad experience. When they have a good one, it's like, my gosh, this is totally different.
Yeah, it's amazing that the employees are happy with that experience, right? Usually it's not a good experience.
No, not at all. I mean, most, I don't know the last time you applied to a job, but it's been years for me, and it wasn't a great experience. Even back in college, I remember going in and, you have to get a paper application, you got to fill it out, then you hand it back, and, most times you never hear anything back. There are still companies that use paper applications, which is crazy.
Yeah, and the waiting time, I mean, it's awful.
Yeah.
And you never hear back, really. In other interviews, I remember asking about that, like, come on, you need to get an answer.
Right.
And I said, well, you cannot answer to everyone, right?
Exactly.
It's a lot of people applying, but if you can do it, that's much better.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's it. Like, I go back to this idea that we're not trying to make decisions on subjective things. Like, I think it's really dangerous when you try to decide, does somebody have, there are a few companies in our industry that got in trouble for facial expressions. They're trying to read facial expressions and decide, is this a person who has the right skills and qualities and personality traits? Mm-hmm. I think that's a really bad application of technology in hiring, because it's, there's so many things that could go wrong there, where the machine and the algorithm are reading things the wrong way. On the other side, there are plenty of things that, again, are binary and black and white. Like, you're either old enough to work or you're not. You either can lift 20 pounds or you can't. You can either speak the language that you need to speak or you can't. You either know this technical skill or have this certification or have this license or you don't. So those are the types of things where you can dramatically reduce the workload on the recruiting team by automating decision making around that stuff. And for the candidate, again, like if you're not going to get the job, I'd rather know sooner rather than later. I don't want to be dragged on in the process. I don't want to wait in the dark until somebody decides to respond. So it's, you know, that disposition at interest and kind of being able to say yes or no to somebody it actually creates a better experience than dragging them on.
Sure. And how is like McDonald's, for example, promoting these to the candidates? Are they because usually they would show these big signs saying we're hiring,
Yeah.
and they would go inside. So now is that process also different?
Yeah, that's a great question. So text to apply is kind of the most successful channel that we've seen, but for McDonald's, the store can be an advertisement and a billboard, right? So, you know, in the old way, it was just we're hiring, come inside, grab an application and whatever. Then it evolved into we're hiring, go visit our career site. Well, then the candidate has to go to the career site. They got to type in their location. They got to find a job that's close by to them. Then they have to apply on their computer, and it's just not all instantaneous. Where we've kind of pushed things is everybody's got a mobile phone in their pocket, and so if you're at McDonald's ordering food, you can text to apply. So it would just be, you know, text McDonald's jobs to 38,000, and that would start the application process. So you can literally apply to a job while you're going through the drive-through and getting your lunch.
While you're waiting for your Big Mac.
Exactly. So it's what we see with McDonald's is they'll have the huge billboard sign, but then just window clings, you know. So it's as you're going through the drive-through, there's a call to action on the window that says, you know, text this number or this keyword to this number, and it's instantaneous.
So what about I think you mentioned something about that before, other type of jobs like healthcare or something more like consulting, like different type of jobs, maybe or C-suite. Is this system also for that, or is more specific for entry levels?
No, absolutely. So it's kind of both ends of the spectrum. I think the way that the technology is applied is a little bit different. So, you know, if you're hiring for engineering roles or nurses, you may not want to force somebody to complete a full application. A lot of times the process there is the recruiter just wants some basic information, and then they'll do a pre-screened phone call. So rather than progress all the way to interview, especially in a really competitive market, it's how can you get qualified candidates on the phone quickly, decide whether or not they're a good fit, let the recruiter do some kind of subjective screening, and then push them to fill out the application. So what we do instead is, you know, it's a short kind of what we call capture conversation. So rather than making somebody fill out a full application, it's, you know, what certifications do you have? What licenses do you have? How long have you been in this line of work? What computer programming languages do you know? You know, for nurses in particular, it's, you know, what specialization do you have?
Right.
And so, you know, and trucking is another good example. Do you have a CDL license? Have you been on the road for 10 years? Have you driven X number of miles? If somebody answers yes in those super competitive markets, then you want to get that person to a recruiter as soon as possible, because it's usually the first recruiter that responds that wins the candidate. And then the other piece too in that world is it's more about this experience you create. So it's not as much about speed. You're not trying to shorten it down to 3 days. Sometimes the hiring process can take 30 days. So in that 30 days, how do you make sure that the candidate gets quick answers to questions they have? If they want to know what your policy around diversity, equity, and inclusion is, how do you serve up videos and kind of content that tells them what it's like to work at the business? You know, scheduling too, making scheduling super easy so they're not doing a bunch of email back and forth with the recruiter. Instead, they just have this assistant that they can say, hey, I'm available Tuesday at 3 p.m. And then the interview is scheduled kind of automatically. So
cool. And in the near future, are you thinking about, I'm thinking maybe two things. Perhaps you already have thought about that. One is the language. It's only English, or it's available in other languages like Spanish, for example, or Chinese. And what about also if there are some places where you can you can be enrolled, you know, to have an interview by including some of the information that is already on LinkedIn.
Sure.
So is it also connected to LinkedIn, or will be in the future?
Yeah, great question.
Saving more time.
Yeah, great question. So to answer the multilingual piece, we are already multilingual. So for the candidate, we can support 100+ languages. So they can, let's say they come to the career site and Olivia, our assistant, responds in English. If the candidate responds in Spanish or Portuguese or simplified Chinese or whatever language they speak in, Olivia will actually respond back in their language. So it's fully translated to adapt to the candidate. For the recruiter, similarly, we have about 15 languages we fully support that are natively translated. So if you have a team over in China, we can adapt to that as well. If you have a team in Brazil and it needs to be in Portuguese, we can adapt to that. So we for sure thought about the multilingual piece. That's the nature of working with these huge global companies. English only is not an option. It has to be multilingual. So, and then to your point, what was the second question again? I'm sorry.
Yes, regarding the connection with other apps like LinkedIn, so that you can make it easier for the candidates.
Yeah, absolutely. So LinkedIn is more kind of roadmap for us. How do we take that LinkedIn profile, digest it, and then rather than them having to search for jobs, we can actually recommend jobs. That's certainly something that's on our radar. We can actually take a resume now and do that. So it's that matching piece of saying, this person graduated from this university, or they're located in this location, or they have XYZ skill or certification. We can actually match that to jobs. We can deliver up content based on location, that kind of stuff. So it's definitely moving in that direction. Beyond that, it's resume databases globally and other social networks as well. I don't know, I'm sure you saw that Snapchat rolled out kind of the video resumes. So like that's kind of the future, is I think resumes as a format are kind of going away. And so people are now creating digital profiles, social profiles, TikTok profiles. And so how do you integrate with those so that, again, the recruiter has access to the information they need, and then it's super simple for the candidate.
Yeah, excellent. That's the elevator pitch for the 1 minute elevator pitch, right? For your resume. That's
exactly right. Yeah.
So good. Thank you very much, Josh. I think the information was great. Is there anything else that you'd like to say?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's certainly like a crazy hiring environment right now. We get it. We're working with clients everywhere. So if there's anything we can do to help for someone who's watching, feel free to reach out to us. On our website, paradox.ai, you can actually chat with Olivia. And when you chat with her, then she can help you schedule a demo and we can show the product if anybody's interested. If not, then it's good talking to you either way.
Wonderful. Very useful for this era of the Great Resignation, right?
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Josh. This was Luciana Paulise. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.